Things weren't looking very good for me after the first turn of this game. In my opponent's shooting phase, with just a single wizard, he managed to destroy nearly half of my large unit of Iron Drakes. Next, to add insult to injury, during my own shooting phase, I only managed to inflict a single wound. And then, to make matters even worse, his fast, hard-hitting combat army was already on top of me, getting ready for a very nasty turn 2 charge. I remember looking at the board at the end of turn 1 and thinking to myself, this really doesn't look very good, does it? But then my opponent said something so completely wild that I literally had to do a double take. He said to me, if I was you, I think that I would surrender. And I'm not gonna lie, that comment kind of broke my brain. Hey folks, I'm William, this is Runeforged. Welcome to the channel. I have just over 1 week left to prepare for my very first Old World tournament. The only problem? Before this week, I haven't played a single game of Warhammer Fantasy in over 20 years. And should I fail to win at least 2 of my 5 tournament games, I have sworn to shave my beard in shame. Will I be able to lead the mighty Dawi to victory, or will I be forced to suffer the ultimate humiliation? Either way, you have a front row seat to the action, so please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel if you'd like to stay up to date on my tournament preparation and progress. In today's video, I'll be doing a quick and dirty battle report of my second ever Warhammer The Old World game. And then I'll talk a little bit about what I learned and what I might do differently in the future. And if you'd like to see my first ever practice game, there should be a link around here somewhere. All right, so next I'm just going to do a quick run through of the lists that were used in this game. I'm running 2,000 points of Dwarven Mountain Holds with the Royal Clan Army of Infamy, and my opponent was running 2,000 points of Warriors of Chaos, and it was the Heralds of Darkness list. So this is a very different list than what I ran for my first practice game. I didn't hate the last list that I ran, but because I have so little time to prepare for this tournament, I actually have only just like 2 or 3 more days left to finalize and send in my list. I decided to go with something that I was pretty sure was going to be functional. And in order to do that, I basically just straight up copy and pasted the list that Ritchie over at the Dawi After Dark YouTube channel is used for his recent GT tournament wins over in the UK. So shout out to Ritchie. If you guys are not aware of his channel, you should definitely go check it out. I'll try to remember to put a link down in the comments, but if not, it's Dawi After Dark. Really fantastic dwarf theme channel. Focuses primarily on the competitive game over in the Nottingham area in the UK. Very, very cool channel. Definitely recommend that you go check it out. But anyway, I am basically blatantly stealing that list. I did make some minor modifications, which in retrospect probably actually made the list weaker. So I might be making a few more tweaks before I have to submit my list by the end of the weekend. But just to go through it very briefly here, the first item on the list is an Anvil of Doom with the Master Rune of Adamant, giving it toughness 10. And then also the Rune of Cleaving. We have a very nasty king who's both very killy and very tanky. So he's got a great weapon, full plate armor. He is my army's general. He's on shield bearers, giving him some additional wounds and some other attacks. He's also got a Master Rune of Smiting, which gives him D6 damage on his attacks. Very, very nasty. This time I've also given him a Master Rune of Gromra, which gives him a 2-up armor save. In the last game, my king was an absolute beast, but he kept getting kind of plinked down by these low strength, low armor penetration attacks. And I'm hoping that the Master Rune of Gromra will keep him alive even longer than he did in the first game. Next, I've got a Rune of Preservation, which makes me immune to the Killing Blow and multiple wounds special rules. So again, very, very tanky. And then I've also got just a Rune of the Furnace. I think this was just like 5 points left over. And if something does have flaming attacks, this is going to make him significantly tankier against that damage. I may end up removing this and maybe replace it with a Rune of Passage or just get rid of it altogether if there are a better use of those 5 points somewhere else, but this is the loadout for this game. Next, I've got a Runesmith here with great weapon, full plate armor. He's also my battle standard bearer, and I've given him the Master Rune of Grungni for the invulnerability saves. Also a Rune of Battle for some additional combat resolution, and 3 Runes of Spellbreaking for those automatic dispel rolls. I am very paranoid about powerful magic in this edition, even though I have not gone up against it yet until this game. But I'm very, very aware that magic is very, very strong, and I'm going to need some ways to deal with that. So that's basically the Runesmith's primary purpose in this list. I've also given him a Rune of Fire. This was not in Ritchie's original list, and this might have been a mistake. Again, the point of this was just a relatively cheap way to give his great weapon magical attacks so that he can deal with ethereal things. And you can't use the Rune of Speed, which is only 5 points, because that can only go on hand weapons and not great weapons. So that was my thought process. It's a cheap way to get magical attacks on that weapon, even though it is redundant with his special rules. So I'm aware of that. I may end up changing it down the line, but we'll have to wait and see. Next, kind of the core of the army is just one pretty large unit of 28 Longbeards. Great weapons, shields, drilled. They have a champion with the Rune of Passage, so that they can move through cover, which is fantastic. It's also got a standard bearer with the Rune of Battle, again, for additional combat res. We've got a Rune of Courage here, which lets me automatically pass any fear or terror check this unit has to make. My opponent did point out after the game that this might be a little bit redundant on this unit, since they're going to be having Leadership 10 with the King in this unit, and they also have the Veteran special rule, which lets me reroll leadership tests. So I may look at removing the Rune of Courage and using those points somewhere else. I've also got the Strolaz rune to give this unit a Vanguard move of 3 inches at the start of the game. That combined with the Anvil of Doom, and in Marching Column, this unit can actually be catapulted up the board about 27 inches on the first turn if everything goes to plan. So that can be pretty unexpected. One thing that my opponent also pointed out is that potentially maybe this rune might be better off on the Iron Drakes in my list, and that way I might be able to get a turn 1 shot off, even if my opponent is sitting directly on the line of deployment. So that's something I'll have to think about for the future. Really, this is just a big tanky block of very nasty Longbeards. They can do a lot of damage, especially if they're arrayed in a line. They have a lot of combat res, so it's very unlikely that they're going to be losing combats on a regular basis. Just a really, really nasty unit. And because so many of my points are tied up in this unit, 500 in the unit itself, another 500 or so in characters, unless my opponent deals with this unit, they're going to be losing out on quite a bit of points. Next, we've got the Dwarf Cart, the Bugman's Cart variation. And this is basically just a kind of a pure support unit for this army. It's designed to buff the movement of any friendly units that are within 6 inches at the start of the turn, basically. I'm not really sure the best use for this cart yet. I've never used it before this game, but I'm curious to see how it works out. At the worst case scenario, it's a pretty cheap use of points, and it supports the other units in the army, so I figure it can't be that bad. Next, we've got a Grudge Thrower here with a single Rune of Forging. It's going to let me reroll a single misfire on the artillery dice. So just general fire support for the army. I can get hopefully pick off some enemies with indirect fire if they're trying to run away and hide. So hopefully it does more for me in this game than it did in the last game. And then lastly here, we have a unit of Iron Drakes. I'll just move my camera really quick. 18 Iron Drakes, drilled. They have a champion with Troll Hammer Torpedo and Center Blast Bombs, and then also a standard bearer with the Rune of Courage. And my understanding is the Rune of Courage is just to make sure that they are definitely going to be standing and shooting, even against enemies that are causing fear and terror, because if this unit is denied stand and shoot, it's going to be really, really bad, because we need at least 1 round of guaranteed shooting on the enemy to kind of thin down their ranks. So anyway, that is my dwarf list. Definitely let me know down in the comments if you see anything that you think could be optimized here. Yeah, definitely open to feedback on that. So to start off with, he has a Sorcerer Lord with the Mark of Tzeentch. He's also a level 4 wizard on a Chaos Steed with Spell Familiar, Infernal Puppet, Ruby Ring of Ruin, and the Battle Magic School. Next, he's got 3 pretty similarly equipped aspiring champions, one of which is his general, and those have the Mark of Chaos Undivided. They are on a Chosen Chaos Chariot, and they also have a Favor of the Gods. The core of his army is a relatively large unit of 12 Chaos Knights. They have the Mark of Chaos Undivided. They've also got a champion who has the Brazen Collar. He has a standard bearer with the Banner of the Baying Hound. Next, he's got a unit of 10 Marauder Horsemen with Cavalry Spears, the Mark of Tzeentch, and they also have a musician in there as well. Next, he's got a Chaos Chariot with halberds and the Mark of Chaos Undivided for a total of 4 chariots in this army, potentially very scary. And then he's also got 2 identically equipped gigantic spawns of chaos with slashing talons, gnashing maws, scaly skin, which counts as heavy armor, and then a gigantic spawn of Nurgle, which gives them poison attacks and a 5-up regen save. Yep, and that is his army. So let's go ahead and get into the game itself. All right, so this is what the board looked like kind of at the beginning of the first turn. So this is deployment plus the Vanguard move by the Chaos Knights. Kind of looking at this deployment, I'm really not sure how I feel about it from my point of view, from the Dwarf point of view. I do have a nice little bunker kind of set up here. I've got an impassable terrain feature in this building, kind of anchoring my left flank. And then I ended up putting the Anvil of Doom over to anchor my right flank. But I am very worried about these Chaos Knights and Chaos Spawn that are coming up the right side. And I'm not really sure yet how I am going to deal with those. I did opt to put the Iron Drakes out front of the unit of Longbeards, and I arrayed them in a fairly long line. My hope was that I could take advantage of the 1 to 2 rounds of shooting plus stand of shoot, and hopefully be able to eliminate several of these chariots or the Chaos Spawn on their way in. All right, so this is the board state at the end of my opponent's turn 1. As you can see, he's moved his forces up. His wizard has actually managed to do a ton of damage to that relatively large unit of Iron Drakes at the front of my position. Basically, all that damage was done by the Chaos Sorcerer that's sitting there in the unit of Marauder Horsemen kind of in the back. He was able to get a line of sight on that unit when it was a little bit longer using some of his spells. So very, very nasty magic phase. Unfortunately, I can't remember if I was either out of range for Dispel of the Anvil, which is very likely, or if I just whiffed my miscast, or if I just whiffed my Dispels. I was certainly out of range of the Runesmith's Dispel range, so that was not a factor. Also, you can see a Pillar of Flame has gone up here right in front of my forces, and that's about to become a very large problem for me. The wizard also cast Oaken Shield on this unit of Chaos Knights, but we realized on the next turn that spell actually has to target the unit that the sorcerer and the unit that he's in. So that was actually a little bit of a misplay there. That was supposed to be on the Marauder cavalry. I didn't actually end up impacting the game. I don't think I would have shot that unit anyway. I was really much more worried about the more imminent charge by these various different chariots. Also, just for reference, I think this one kind of here in the middle right was his general, and the one here in the middle left was the one that I used my Royal Clans has a special rule where they like grudge a character at the beginning of the game, and all your army gets hatred against that model, which means they reroll close combat. They reroll misses in close combat on the first turn of the combat. And I also get an additional, I think, 75 victory points if I end up destroying that unit by the end of the game. In retrospect, I probably should have just put the grudge on the general and just kind of put all my eggs in one basket and tried to destroy it. And I may have mind gamed myself out of doing that because I was worried that he was going to, if he was both the general and I grudged him, that unit would be worth an additional 175 victory points. I was kind of afraid he would just kind of run away with it and not use it or keep it in reserve till the end of the game. And I really, really wanted to get those juicy points. So I ended up splitting out I ended up putting the grudge on a different chariot. But yeah, so I'm probably going to think a little bit more about who I want to put my grudges on in the future. Very, very cool mechanic, by the way. Love that. Very flavorful for dwarves. Anything else of note here? I mean, I got the grudge thrower back here, poised to shoot. It'll probably be firing indirectly for most of the game because of line of sight. And then I've got the cart over here. I wanted to keep him over here at the start of the game just to make sure that he wasn't going to bring anything kind of cheeky down this left flank. So maybe I could hold it up for a turn or two and prevent it from getting into my back line. All right, so that is my opponent's turn 1. Then moving over to my turn 1, I end up moving my Iron Drakes and Longbeards forward a little bit. The main reason for this is, if you go back to my opponent's turn, this flank was not quite as secure as I wanted it to be. And I was really worried about these Chaos Knights being able to charge into the Longbeards without clipping the anvil. So I decided to move my army up just a little bit so that my flank would be better protected. Also, I moved the cart over from behind the building to over here near the anvil. It does show it as being destroyed for some reason. I don't know if I accidentally deleted it during the game and then brought it back or what the deal was. So I just moved the cart over here by the anvil, hopefully to try and slow up this massive and very scary unit of Chaos Knights that's coming up my right flank. Unfortunately, during my shooting phase, I only managed to do a single wound. I think it was just like with a normal Drake gun on his general's chariot, which is, you know, it is something, but not nearly as much as I had hoped. So really the Iron Drakes this turn not being super effective, and then the Stone Thrower just completely whiffed. So that was also a bit of a nothing burger. There was no close combat. I don't think, none of my magic went off this turn. I don't know. I can't remember if I just rolled badly or if he maybe dispelled it. But yeah, the anvil, unfortunately, was not able to get off a single spell this turn. Very, very unfortunate. And this was kind of the point in the game where my opponent said that if he was me, he might give up. And I'll provide some more context to that at the end of the video. You know, I don't want to spoil the ending, but it's not nearly as dramatic as it sounds. So definitely, please don't leave any like hate comments for him in the comments. It was not like that at all. All right, let's see. What else do we have? I think that was the end of my turn one. Nothing else really of note here. I am very worried about this Pillar of Fire, and I actually forget to dispel it, I think, in my turn, which is really unfortunate because it ends up doing a lot of damage. All right, now moving to my opponent's turn two. As you can see, a bunch of his stuff is charging in over here. It ended up charging my Iron Drakes, and then they ended up losing, but because I have Stubborn, I was able to fall back in good order back through my unit of Longbeards, which was great. The good thing is that the Iron Drakes did manage to destroy the enemy general on the stand and shoot, which was absolutely fantastic. And that was all the Drake guns. I didn't even need to use the Cinder Blast bombs on that, so that was great. So the general is now down. That's like 218 points plus the 100 points for being the general, so that's a pretty good chunk. Unfortunately, the rest of these chariots here, there's another like aspiring champion chariot and then a normal chariot and a spawn. They managed to do some pretty significant work on the Iron Drakes, bringing them down to just 4 models. And then again, like I said, the Iron Drakes ended up losing the combat. I popped Stubborn, which let me fall back in good order back through my troops, which was pretty nice. There was also the Pillar of Fire over here, which managed to go through my unit of Longbeards. Looks like it took off maybe 3 of those, which is not ideal, but it is what it is. And then we also had an aspiring champion chariot charge into the Anvil of Doom. Again, this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. I don't think that he realized the implication of the anvil being toughness 10, because basically very few of his attacks were able to wound it at all. And if they were wounding it, they were wounding it on 6s. So this was actually really good for me. Well, it was not as bad as it could have been if he elected to either charge that unit into the Longbeards and maybe potentially win that combat, although that would maybe be pretty unlikely. Or if he'd managed to bring that chariot around earlier and kind of get into my backline. I am still very worried about what's going on over here in this right flank. And I don't really know if I have a good answer for dealing with it. I guess we'll look at that more in the next turn. All right, so during my turn, I am able to destroy the chariot over here. I'm able to deal a wound to this spawn. And I think he only managed to kill 2 of my Longbeards during this combat, so I won by a massive amount. This unit actually has a ton of static combat resolution because I've got my banner with Rune of Battle, I've got my battle standard bearer also with Rune of Battle, close order, and I actually did quite a bit of damage this phase, so I won by a pretty hefty margin, which caused the other chariot to break and run. Now, unfortunately, this Chaos Spawn is unbreakable, and I only managed to do a single wound to it, so my Longbeards are going to be stuck in this combat for at least another turn. I am desperately trying to get these Iron Drakes in a position where they're going to be able to do something about this incoming mass of Chaos Knights, but it's pretty slow going because I'm in kind of an awkward position. All right, moving on to my opponent's turn 3. Let's see. I don't know if there was any significant shooting here because there's just not a lot of targets for his wizard now that my units are kind of engaged in close combat or otherwise out of line of sight. So he does end up rallying this aspiring champion chariot. This is the one that I have grudged. He does end up rallying this and moving it back around to try and go for my backline, which is very scary. Other than that, not a ton of other movement. I think he got a little bit blocked here. I know he did a kind of a reform on these knights and the chaos spawns kind of move randomly, so he doesn't have a lot of control over that. In retrospect, I don't think that he remembered that he could temporarily wheel off the edge of the board in order to kind of get in here in a way that made sense. So he may have accidentally wasted a turn doing some reforming when he probably could have come in here a little bit earlier, which would have been really bad. Let's see, is there anything else here? Yeah, so in close combat, I ended up losing, I think four Longbeards to the Chaos Spawn, most of which were to the Stomps. I think he actually forgot to do his Stomp attacks the round before, so that could have been bad for me. But I did end up losing quite a few Longbeards to those Stomps, so that was bad. I only managed to do 2 wounds in return, and a big reason why this fight was kind of so messy is that my King and my Runesmith are not in base-to-base contact with this spawn, and because he's not a character, I can't challenge him. So my King is really only getting 1 attack return, and he's the character that would be able to deal with the spawn very, very quickly if he was able to leverage all of his attacks. So once again, I'm going to be stuck here for at least 1 more turn because that spawn is unbreakable. All right, moving into my turn 3. I don't think that I have any meaningful shooting this round, and there wasn't a lot of movement either, it doesn't look like. I did reposition my Iron Drakes slightly, and I tried to move my cart out to do a little bit of blocking. In retrospect, I wonder if I should have moved this cart a little bit lower and tried to maybe block the knights as well, and just, accept the fact that that cart is going to die, and maybe hopefully it'll just buy me a little bit of time. I wonder if maybe I should have, tried to move it further south and then try to line it up in such a way that if the knights charged me and I ran, they might run themselves off the board. So maybe that would buy me an extra turn. So let me know if you think there was a better placement for this cart. I'm really not sure. Then in close combat, it looks like the spawn wasn't able to do as much damage this turn, only killing 2 Longbeards, whereas I managed to do, it looks like 2 wounds to the spawn itself, leaving just 1 wound remaining. And over here on the anvil, it looks like I'm just kind of trading wounds with this chariot. It looks like he managed to land a lucky wound. But because I'm unbreakable, even if I lose, I'm really not going anywhere significant. Especially since this cart is backed up against me. So even though I lose and give ground, I don't actually end up going anywhere. All right, so moving into my opponent's turn 4. So he does end up maneuvering these knights in my back line, very scary. In retrospect, I wonder if he would have been better off angling these in such a way that he was more threatening the Longbeards. Because I think even at this point, for him to win this game, especially in any sort of convincing way, he really does need to deal with this Longbeard threat. And I'm not sure if going after the Stone Thrower here was the right play. But again, I'm not sure. Let me know down in the comments if you think there was a better use of these knights on this turn. During the close combat phase, I did finally manage to take out the Chaos Spawn. Looks like I did an additional wound to this chariot down here, which is fantastic. And doesn't look like there's much else that happened in this turn. So moving on to my turn 4. This one was a little bit wild. I did end up charging into this chariot here with my unit of Longbeards. And then because of the free wheel that you get when you charge, the free wheel to a line, it actually ended up wrapping my unit really, really far around the map. And I accidentally made accidental contact with this unit of Maraud Horsemen. He did elect to flee, so it didn't end up being a particularly big deal. There was a lot of question about what should have happened in this scenario. And we spent a lot of time looking up whether or not this was how this should have worked out. And normally you're not allowed to move any model more than 2 times its movement characteristic. And obviously these dwarves moved way more than that. But in the FAQ for the rulebook, the second FAQ for the rulebook, there is a very specific passage in there about when you are allowed to move more than double your charge or more than double your move characteristic. And the free wheel on the charge is in there as being a legitimate usage. So it does look like this charge was legal the way that it kind of played out. The only question we had is we weren't really sure how to handle this accidental contact up here. But we treated it just as if that unit was charged as well. They elected to flee. I wasn't going to be able to pursue anyway, so it was not really it wasn't a big deal. This feels relatively, it feels like this could be a possible way that it played out. If you guys have a better answer for how this was supposed to work, definitely let me know down in the comments so we can do that correctly next time, if we didn't do it right this time. Fortunately for me, I was able to finally destroy this chariot that had been holding up the anvil. And I actually think that even though this chariot is touching the anvil right now. I don't think they're actually in combat right now. I think this was actually just a misplay. This is supposed to be an inch away. I also tried to maneuver the Iron Drakes around a little bit and take some shots at the Chaos Knights. I think I did manage to maybe destroy a couple of them, one or two. And also this turn, my Stone Thrower finally was able to do something. It did score at least one kill on the Knights, which was nice. So moving on to my opponent's turn 5. He did kind of move these Marauder Horsemen down outside of the kind of arc of my Longbeards. So they're now behind me, which is not ideal. And he also did some other repositioning with some of the various other units, which you can see here. In the magic phase, I think he did a pretty significant chunk of damage to my Longbeards here with magic, and he also managed to get down another Pillar of Flame, which is unfortunate. Luckily, at this point, my Anvil was out of combat, so I was able to probably stop some of those spells, so it wasn't as bad as it could have been. In the close combat phase, he also managed to charge and wipe out that Grudge Thrower. So unfortunately, that Grudge Thrower didn't really get to do much this game. It really did nothing except kill a single knight, which is probably not worth it. In terms, so he did some magic. There was no other close combat besides the knights just kind of wiping that Grudge Thrower. So nothing really of note there. But then moving into my turn 5, things really started to get out of control. So I turned around my big unit of Longbeards. I was able to get the armor buff from the Anvil onto them as well. But the saving grace of this turn was that during my shooting phase, the Anvil did its magic missile into this unit of Marauders, and it basically destroyed everything in there except for the Chaos Lord. I think I rolled 11 shots. I was wounding on 3s, and I think I wounded like 9 or 10 times, something crazy. And it's a -2 armor save, so they weren't really getting an armor save, if any. And it just completely obliterated that entire unit of Marauders. This is what the game looked like at the end. This was going to be the start of my 6th turn. So this was going to be the start of my 6th turn, but my opponent actually conceded at the end of his 6th turn. All right, and then here is the final score of the game. My opponent was able to take out my Dwarf Cart, my Grudge Thrower, and that big unit of Iron Drakes for a total of... and he also got a banner off the Iron Drakes. So that was a total of 570 victory points. And then I managed to take out 2 of those aspiring champions on chosen chariots. I took out the regular chariot. I took out the 10-man unit of Marauder Horsemen with a very lucky series of rolls from the Anvil, which was fantastic. And I also got one of the gigantic Spawns of Chaos. So the final score was 961 points for me versus the 570 points for my opponent. So overall, this game actually felt pretty good. Maybe with a bit of a weak start at the beginning and maybe some questionable deployment and maybe a little bit of an unlucky first turn, but we managed to bring it back in the end. I think overall, the fundamentals of the list seem pretty solid, and it feels really difficult for my opponents to score points on this army. And probably a big part of that is like maybe there's like 1,000 points or so that's tied up in that big unit of very tanky Longbeards. Plus the roughly 350 point toughness 10 Anvil is also very hard to destroy. Overall, I think the Iron Drakes did pretty well. They managed to weather that first charge against the chariots and the spawn pretty well. And they managed to destroy the enemy general on the stand and shoot. I also think that the Longbeards and the embedded characters did a really good job this game. They did a lot of work. They managed to destroy, I think, 2 chariots and a chaos spawn without giving up any points, which is, what more can you ask? The Runesmith, I think, in particular, did really well. The Banner of Grungni helped keep the Longbeards unit alive. I think they might have actually gone down if I didn't have Banner of Grungni in that unit. Also, the 3 runes of spellbreaking were pretty pivotal during the course of the game. Unfortunately, I think my king got a little bit sidelined during this game. Largely because that unit of Longbeards kind of got stuck in that combat with the Chaos Spawn, and my king was not in base to base with it. So it took a really long time to finish that Chaos Spawn off. And all those turns, my king wasn't really doing much other than a single attack per turn. So not ideal. Fortunately, when the king did manage to connect with an enemy, he definitely did some work. So I do appreciate that. The Anvil did okay, despite not being able to get a lot of its spells off. I think a lot of it was bad rolling, and then some of it was just like my opponent having a higher level wizard and being able to dispel. But the good news is it managed to hold that right flank for a really long time. I don't think that my opponent realized the implication of having a toughness 10 anvil, kind of anchoring that flank. And he did charge into it with a chariot, which kept that chariot tied up for quite some time. Also, kind of like the positioning of the anvil also made it kind of hard for the knights to get in to my flank, I think, which was definitely the plan, but I didn't think it would be as effective as it was. I think maybe in retrospect, those knights probably could have gotten into my backline a little bit faster with a little bit of a different maneuvering. But I do know that my opponent was hampered a little bit by the random movement on the spawn, and that prevented him from kind of getting in where he wanted to on a couple of the turns. So not really sure what he could or should have done differently in that scenario. Overall, I still don't really know how I feel about the dwarf cart. I mean, if you're just spending the 65 points solely so that you can get more maneuverability on your kind of dwarf infantry units, I think that's probably still worth it. But after that point, like after my guys kind of stop moving, or if it gets out of range or whatever, I'm not really sure what I should be doing with that dwarf cart. So if you have ideas, recommendations, thoughts, definitely let me know down in the comments. Oh, and I did just want to briefly address like the clickbait title about how my opponent said that I should surrender after turn 1. He did actually say that, or something to that effect. When he said it, I didn't get the impression that there was anything like malicious about it. There was like some additional context after the fact. Like I think he told me like he's a very pessimistic person and he like concedes games early a lot. So he was literally saying like, hey, if our positions were reversed, I might concede the game here, even though that might not be a good idea because there's definitely still a chance to win. So yeah, I don't think it was malicious at all. Please don't roast him in the comments or whatever. He was a super nice dude, very friendly. So if you've enjoyed this video, please consider checking out this next battle report, which should be popping up on your screen right about now. Also, if you are a big fan of dwarves and like to get your hands on some dwarven merch, go ahead and check out the Runeforged Dwarven Proverb t-shirt, which hopefully will also be popping up on your screen right about now. And if that looks interesting to you, there should be a link to my Etsy store where you can purchase that shirt for yourself. But yeah, I think that's about it for now. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye.